some things you don't plan. They just get planned for you. And I find it interesting in my devotional this morning, all of a sudden it's linking it, we're singing that song, Holy, Holy, Holy. And what is that doing? It's giving us a glimpse of what eternity is going to look like, doesn't it? And in my devotional this morning, and I'm going to read just a little bit here. Are you experiencing the schizophrenia of having eternity hardwired into your heart, but living as if this moment is all there is? We get torn, don't we? We really do. We're created to live in a forever relationship, and yet each day carries its burdens, and we forget about where we're going to end up, don't we? And that causes a lot of stress and anxiety in our lives. It's wonderful, and let me read just a couple here. It's wonderful to have a good marriage, but it's not going to be a paradise. It's great to have a good relationship with your children, but they're never going to deliver paradise to you. That beautiful house, well, it starts decaying the moment it's finished being built, doesn't it? Our eternity amnesia makes you unrealistically expectant, vulnerable to the pulls and shoves of daily life, doesn't it? Well, do you hunger for a paradise? Do you have paradise-like expectations in our fallen world moments? What a great question to consider. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this day, this moment, but realize, Lord, that you have something much bigger and better planned for us. This is but just a short time. And then, you have drawn us to you, and we have the privilege of being with you for all eternity. I just pray, Lord, that the next time that the men in this room are pulled into a situation that is very temporal at best, we can just keep in mind the eternal blessings that are in store for us. In Jesus' holy name. And all the men said, amen. My wife likes to say, I try to find something every day that delights me. And one of the delights that I have during the course of a year is that for several years now, many years now, there's been a children's triathlon at North Park, usually right around the end of July, early August. And as someone that's competed in triathlons for decades, it is so much fun to see these little 8-year-olds by the side of the pool, ready to go in their first triathlon. And volunteering for that event and helping out, it's just a delight. And one year, word got out, we're going to have Keith Rothkus come and visit, a politician. And I'm thinking, oh boy, here's a politician with an entourage and picture time. And well, soon, the race is getting near to start, and this guy just sort of wanders by himself down the pool deck. And I recognize him because, campaign posters, he'd served as congressman for us. And I thought, where's his entourage? And all he wanted to know was what was going on here and what's this like and what are these kids doing? And I found very quickly that he just had an inquiring mind that wanted to learn. It wasn't about him. Yeah, he said a few words, right? But then I was talking to another man this morning, Dave Butler, and evidently Keith had come down and visited one of his factories. And politicians did that a lot. And their first concern was where's a good shot for a picture? Where's a good shot where I can be seen with the guys for a picture for promotion? Right? And Keith walked in and just wanted to know, how do you guys run this factory? What are your needs? And none of this, yeah, there's probably a picture taken, but he really genuinely wanted to know what was going on in that factory. And so over the years that I've gotten to know Keith a little bit, I found him to be intellectually curious, passionate about his beliefs and his faith. And I'm just so excited to hear what he has to say this morning from a man that I know is a man of God. Will you all join me in welcoming Keith Rothfuss?
All the way to the right. Hear me now? Good. All right. Morning, guys. Hey, thanks for helping me. Or having me. Coach, thanks for introducing me. And thanks to Earl. Giving me credit. From time to time. We'll keep having coffee with a couple of guys. We got to talk about some things. Talk to Georgie. I talked to Georgie. Georgie liked what I had to say, and here I am. I always kind of try to avoid getting into myself. I remember there was a time when the majority party in the House, you have your Speaker of the House, and the Speaker can't be up in the chair the whole time. So one of the privileges of the majority is the Speaker gets to designate somebody to sit in the chair for them. And it's really cool when you get to be the designee because you're up there at the big flag behind you. You got the gavel if you have to use it. And sometimes they'll put the freshmen up there when nothing really is going on. If you ever seen these, what they call special order speeches at night when nobody's watching except the nerds on C-SPAN, that's with me. And so you get to sit there and hear these guys debate. And I'm doing that one night. So the camera's rolling. I'm on C-SPAN watching the crowd. Then out of the corner of my eye, she comes in. And it's Nancy Pelosi. And this is like the first term after she's no longer Speaker. But she has a couple of kids with her. And because you can take kids on the floor to give them a tour and show them everything. And I thought she was just going to come in and look around the gym. Then she starts walking towards me. And then she starts to walk up on the Speaker's podium. This is not good. And then she comes up to me and she grabs my hand. And she's holding my hand and looking me in the eye. She's like, would you let these little boys hold the gavel? And I'm like, if C-SPAN is showing Nancy Pelosi holding my hand, I'm going to be in real trouble back home. I don't think anybody ever saw me on that. But it's good to be back at this church. This is a great church. God bless you guys, and God bless you for what you're doing and sticking together. I got to confess, the last time I was here was the day I lost. I was working the pole out here, and it is what it is. So it's things happen for a reason. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the reading I've been doing over the last couple of years. I'm active with some local matters. I'm on the board of Enterprise Bank. I do some nonprofit stuff. I've been helping some candidates a little bit here and there. But I've been doing a lot of reading, too, about the state of affairs that we're in and doing some writing about it. I've stumbled into some tremendous resources, and you're probably familiar with some of them, I would think. And I've been doing a lot of talking with different guys about where we're at. Does anybody not think that men and boys are in crisis today? I've done a little bit of work at the Red Door, if you're familiar with that ministry. It's downtown. It's at the corner of Boulevard of the Allies and Stanwix. They feed sandwiches and coffee to the homeless at 10:30 every morning. And I like to go out and start talking to the folks who are on the street. I remember talking to one person active in street ministry, and street people will tell you, I guess, because they never told me, but one of their struggles is they feel invisible. Nobody looks at them. And so we have to be intentional about actually looking at them and then maybe drawing them out in the conversation. And so they line up for their sandwich. They also have a little door where they hand out, if they have it, clothes, gloves. Sometimes there's sleeping bags. And so my job one morning was to, okay, what do you need? What are you looking for? And socks, underwear. Do you have any toiletries back there? And then there was a young man who all he wanted was a sleeping bag. And it really just kind of struck my heart. And because I got kids, I got 6 kids, ages 15 to 31. Some are in their mid 20s. This kid was young. So I said, how old are you? He says, 24. What's your name? And I'm thinking, okay, brought Peter to Jesus, right? See, these guys can bring you to Jesus. How long you been on the street? About a week. No, really? Really? A week? Well, actually, it's been longer than that. I got kicked out of the last place a week ago, and I need a sleeping bag. So how long you been doing this? Well, probably since I was 18. I've been in and out of different places. I went into foster care at 11. Bingo. Obviously, the kid had a broken home. You know, a lot of the folks you talk to on the street, there's obvious mental problems. I'm sure he had his share. But he was a guy that you could actually see there's a path to getting back some way. It's going to be a long process. But again, it struck me the crisis that we have with guys and what's going on out there. I'm thinking of another time when I was in office. If you remember, maybe 2015, 2016, there was a horrific stabbing out at Franklin Regional in Murraysville. Young man stabbed 20 people. Almost killed somebody. Thank God the person didn't die. But I had the opportunity the next day. I happened to be speaking at a high school out in Beaver County at Blackhawk. And there were 800 kids there. And I was just going to do my regular thing, talk about politics, and one of you people out here can be elected someday. And I felt compelled to speak about what had happened at Franklin Regional the day before. And I said, we have to get quiet for a minute. Then we calm down. Or surprise, 800 kids, teenagers, you know. And I kind of fessed up that I'm old because when I was in high school, it was the 1970s. And at that time, the oldies were the 50s. And there was a song, you know, you watch Happy Days, whatever. And there was a song that went something like this. And I'm telling the kids, I said, out of bed, off to school. The teacher's teaching the golden rule. How many of you guys know what the golden rule is? Yeah, we know. Thank you. But nobody was raising their hand. And I said, it's real simple. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. And then I went there. I said, look at each other. Because I have a feeling somebody in this room is bullying somebody, and somebody's being bullied. We're not supposed to be doing that. Every one of you was made by God. Public school. I'm saying it. This is a truth. This is a truth that has to be shouted from the housetops. You are made by God. He does not make mistakes. You have a purpose. I can't tell you what the purpose is. All I can tell you is that there is one. And it's up to you to find people to help you find that purpose. That's all I said. And these kids came up to me afterwards. I'm like, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. They're hungry for it. So as I kind of like stumble through the culture that we're living through right now and seeing what's going on, and the statistics are shocking. You know, there was a article that David Brooks, not one of my favorite columnists, wrote in the New York Times recently about the crisis of men and boys. Yeah, you know, and he goes through all the statistics about it's not in your handout, but suicides, drugs, academic. Again, you go to the colleges today. That the majority of students are women. I think I don't know if it was in his. Yeah, he says at the top 16 American law schools, not a single of the flagship law reviews has a man as an editor in chief right now. The opioid crisis disproportionately affecting men. Something's going on out there, and a lot of it, I think, is almost all of it is spiritual. And so as I read these books, and I came across this book by John Eldredge. Who's familiar with John Eldredge and his work here, the Wild at Heart ministry? This stuff it's not a coincidence that men like John Eldredge are standing up right now and filling this gap. But he wrote a book called Wild at Heart, which I haven't read, but I did read Fathered by God, which I'm told is very similar to Wild at Heart. But he put stuff in there about the importance of understanding where we came from. Things that, as Corky said in the opening devotion, look, we're not made for this world. We're made for eternity. Yet with life coming at us so fast, particularly in this modern era and postmodern era, it's very easy to lose sight of who we are and where we're headed. Eldredge had a quote, and I put this one in the handout, which really struck me. It was from a guy named George MacDonald. It's right at the top. George MacDonald was a congregational minister in the 19th century, in the 1800s in Scotland. I had never been familiar with his work, but apparently C.S. Lewis was, and he was very formative for C.S. Lewis. And so MacDonald wrote, "The refusal to look up to God as our Father is the one central wrong in the whole human affair. The inability, the one central misery. Whatever serves to clear any difficulty from the way of the recognition of the Father will therefore more or less undermine every difficulty in life." That to me was such a sweeping statement when he says the one central wrong and the inability to look at God the Father, the one central misery. That's pretty definitive. And then I was reading a book called Loved as I Am by a nun, Sister Miriam Heidland. I mentioned that in the back. There's a reference or resources section. Sister Miriam has a great story. She was a party girl. She was really a partier in college, doing everything that she shouldn't do. She had a wound as a child, with respect to trying to reconcile how she came to be into the world. She was put up for adoption. Her parents, she was abused at one point, and ended up having a pretty wild life in college. But it wasn't until she encountered folks who really knew the Lord that she really began to discern who she was. And she had this personal kind of revelation about God being her loving Father. And so in her book, Loved as I Am, she puts a footnote to a work that John Paul II did back in 2000. And so I went back to the work that John Paul had written in a book called Crossing the Threshold of Hope. Now, it was a little bit before that, maybe it was 1994. But as John Paul was preparing the world and the Catholic Church for the celebration of the millennium, the 2000th birthday of Jesus. And John Paul wrote, "The father-son paradigm is ageless. It is older than human history. The rays of fatherhood contained in this formulation belong to the Trinitarian mystery of God himself, which shines forth from him, illuminating man and his history. This notwithstanding, as we know from Revelation, in human history, the rays of fatherhood meet a first resistance in the obscure but the real fact of original sin. This is truly the key for interpreting reality." Again, that's a very sweeping statement. It reminded me of MacDonald saying, the one central wrong or the one central misery. The key for interpreting reality. Original sin is not only the violation of a positive command of God, but also, and above all, A violation of the will of God is expressed in that command. Original sin attempts then to abolish fatherhood, destroying its rays which permeate the created world, placing in doubt the truth about God, who is love, and leaving man only with a sense of the master-slave relationship. As a result, the Lord appears jealous of his power over the world and over man, and consequently, man feels goaded to do battle against God. No differently than in any epoch of history, the enslaved man is driven to take sides against the master who kept him enslaved. That was just so profound, just reading that and taking a look at where the world is today. One of the things that really helped me as in my years in office was the second Psalm. Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? They shake their fist against God and they want to break the chains, but the one who sits in heaven laughs at them. You can't do this battle with God. We have to shift the paradigm and understand that God is not our master. We are not slaves. Jesus came to set us free. And we have to get back to this idea that we have a generous, loving Father who will give us bread when we ask for bread and not a stone, who will give us fish when we ask for fish and not a snake. But why doesn't it work out for us? Why? This requires us to have this radical trust. There was I think I put this one in the resources. Yeah, Wilfred Stinnison has a book called Into Your Hands, Father, and he writes that when we see bad things happening, when we see evil happening, even to us, God is so good and so infinite that he will take what happens and create something even better because that evil happened. That is so, it's so difficult to fathom. But this is the infinite God we have. I don't know if you've seen any of the pictures of the new Webb telescope. It's breathtaking. I mean, they're snapping photos at the edge of the universe from 13 billion years ago. This is the Creator who scatters billions of light years across the night sky. The mountains melt like wax before him. As I drive back and forth across the state and go through the mountains, those are 340 million years old. Yet they melt like wax before the Lord. We have no idea of how awesome and breathtaking he is. Yet who are we that he's mindful of us? Yet with everything at life coming at us, and then you overlay that, the whole spiritual nature of life. And that there is one, there are many, there are legion who want to trip us up. And that is a reality. That me personally, I go, the devil schmevel, Yeah, he was responsible for Hitler. He's responsible for this evil stuff. I'm good, right? He's attacking each of us. You do street ministry and you see it. He's attacking us too. He's attacking you and you and you and you and you. He's trying to mess us up. Father Dan Leary, I met him earlier this year. Father Dan is a very interesting guy. He's a priest in the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. And I met him at a retreat over in New Jersey this past May. And he said, you should really come to Mexico because he is chaplain for something called the World Villages for Children. There is another priest from the Diocese of Washington, D.C. who went to Korea in the 1950s to serve the poor. Mother Teresa, everybody knows about her, but this guy was like the Mother Teresa. He went to the garbage heaps of Korea and started picking kids off of the garbage heaps and built a school for them. These kids were desperately poor. Father L. Schwartz is his name. He ended up dying of Lou Gehrig's disease in 1992, but not before. launching this worldwide ministry that has homes and schools for kids in Korea, the Philippines, Mexico, Guatemala, Tanzania, Honduras, Brazil. In Mexico, where I went to visit, there is a school for 3,200 young ladies between the ages of 12 and 18. It's boarding school, run by 60 Catholic nuns. 3,200 girls, 60 Catholic nuns. These are kids pulled from the poorest of the poor areas of Mexico, from the mountain villages where the cartels hold sway, from the barrios of Mexico City, desperately poor. And they're given a chance to break the cycle of violence and poverty. Father Dan tells me 70% of these girls have been sexually abused. There is a school for boys in Guadalajara, 2,000 boys. Same deal. The fatherless. You read the stories about what the cartels are doing in Mexico and how they recruit these kids, 13, 14, 15, to pull them in. The cartels, they make ISIS look like Sunday school guys. They have developed this art of dismemberment, which, again, you shake your head. Where's God? Where this untold evil that's down there? Not unlike the evil that we saw, we didn't see it, but in history teaches us, was happening in the Aztecs in the late 1400s, early 1500s when the Spanish go in. There was one weekend in Mexico City in 1480 about when they dedicated the new temples down there, that they sacrificed 80,000 people. This is industrial scale violence that they were committing. And you look at the cartels, and 250,000 murders over the last 20 years. But Father Dan, he told me, he said, look, everybody has to be fathers. Everybody has to be fathers. You have God the Father, you have your earthly father, and then there's the father of lies. The father of lies is going to attack your father to obscure who God the Father is. Look, I lost my dad 3 years ago. We had a good home. Dad took care of us, mom and dad, but we live in a fallen world, okay? There's no such, I'm not a perfect dad. I look back and I think, gosh, I wish I would have read this Eldridge book, 30 years ago before I had kids. It's the fall. The fall did such damage to us that there's nothing that's going to be perfect. And we have to understand that the father of lies is going to do whatever he can to pull us away from God the Father. So it's really, I think, important for us to reflect that yes, we have a generous, loving God, but there's somebody out there who's trying to obscure that from us. And then you look across the culture and see where we're at today, and boy, isn't that the truth? So how do we get back? I think we get back by starting to just step back ourselves for a minute and begin to reflect. Everything the Lord told us, everything Jesus told us is true. Everything. Yeah, I have one of the scripture quotes I include in there is from John 14. John 14, 15, 16, 17. Now, these right before Jesus goes to the cross, he mentions the Father 40 times in those chapters. He's telling us something. And then after he rises, he says, Mary Magdalene, don't touch me. I've not yet ascended to my Father and to your Father, my God and your God. The devil wants us to think that we're on our own, that we are an orphan, and that we are not a son. And I have this little quote there, orphan or son. There's a couple of podcasters out of Vancouver, Jake Kime and Brett Powell. They have something called the Way of the Heart podcast. And it's just two dudes, Catholic, but they banter back and forth. And it's really, look, if you're walking in the Christian faith, this is going to resonate to you. And they're tackling all the big issues that we struggle with. Jake says, he's reading Eldridge. He says, look, it's like, I'm on my own. There's nobody here to help me. And I got to get it right. Every guy's kind of struggling with that. Or as Eldridge says, at the heart of every guy is this nagging question. Do I have what it takes? Eldridge's premise is that we need somebody fathering us. And the truth that Eldridge reveals is that you are being fathered. God is fathering you. He's going to use the circumstances of your life to father you. You may not feel it, but he is a good and loving God. He is a generous father. And that's where trust comes in. But it's important that we be talking to each other and affirming that, because you can't do it on your own. We all need help. Eldridge talks about, not being able to fix a sprinkler and feeling like an idiot when he goes to the hardware store because he can't figure out what he's supposed to do. But the guy at the hardware store has the gift who can. And in that instance, God can use the guy at the hardware store to father. Again, I just kind of put these things out there to provoke some thinking, some reflection. These are times, like I told the kids in high school, it's not a mistake that you're here. There's a purpose for you. No matter where you're at in your walk, God can use that. And our job is to kind of figure it out. I am so impressed that you have this number of guys together. This is, I joined a couple guys groups. You have like 5, 6, 10 guys at the most. But to see this group here is very impressive. And I just want to commend you for it. And I want to encourage you to stick with it. And to pray for each other. To pray for your dads if you're blessed to still have a dad. And to pray for your sons and grandsons. I'm giving Eldridge's book out to all the guys in my family. I think it's such a resource. And the resources I've identified on the back of the sheet, I think you should also be taking a look at. The resources I mentioned are just really scratching the surface of the stuff I've read and the universe that's out there. So just stick with it. And with that, I'm going to kind of throw it open to questions or reflections, or I don't know, Coach, you said sometimes we break off and do discussions at tables, but I'm open to doing whatever you guys would want. This one's a little hard because I got convicted about a month ago. Did anybody go to the Pittsburgh Praise at the stadium? Yeah. Okay. So I had breakfast with the guy who organized that, and he told me about his dad is in worldwide. He does mission work, and his dad does mission work. And he mentioned how that day he was out there praying with his dad. And I'm thinking back, how much did I pray with my own dad? And I really didn't. Well, how much am I praying with my kids? Not enough. Pray with your kids if you can. If the door is still open. I mean, the door is still open with my kids. It's But I think if I could really just share the faith more with kids, you just take it for granted. And I think, like, I look back at my childhood, my parents took it for granted. We can't take it for granted. Be natural about what God is doing for us. Because understand, I think that the devil's attacking them too, right? And talking with them, being intentional, making a phone call, shooting a text, and communication is key. And even if you're at a stage right now where maybe you're not talking with your kid that much, keep talking. Keep talking. I'm not gonna talk about where Dad was not perfect. I just, again, I think one of the things I would say about my dad is that there was a virtue there of that I didn't fully appreciate. Um, uh, he reminds me here, and this might kind of say where he could have been better. It's that parable about where the master goes out and says, I need you to work. And the guy says, oh, yeah, I'll do it. And then it never does. But the other guy says, I'm not going to do that. But he actually goes out and does it. Yeah. My dad was the latter, where he'd say, he'd actually get the job done. We have all these, guys who say they're going to do something, but they never do it. And then the guys who grumble about it, but actually do the work. So my dad would have been more, although even when he grumbled, he kept it to himself, but you could tell he was grumbling. Never underestimate the importance of actually just rolling up your sleeves and grinding it out. Again, my dad, his parents, he was born in 1935, so different time, and the depression hit his family very hard. He was the youngest of three kids. The other kids were 10 and 12 old. You have to give, when you look at your own dad, don't look just like your dad. Look at your grandparents. Okay, and you look at what they were struggling with. I talked all the time about my mother's parents who came to this country without 2 nickels to rub together, and they died without 2 nickels to rub together. But there was a different culture too, where again, my mother's father's brother had a little farm. That's what kept them fed during the Depression. They were lucky to get eggs. We take so much for granted here. To what Corky, when he began the reflection this morning about, we just expect so much here, and we're losing sight of our ultimate destiny. I don't know if that answered your question, but I think for Dad it was actually getting the job done, working, and he had to work Sundays a lot, which he was a technician for IBM, so they took the banks would take down the machines on Sunday. That's when he got to work. I miss Dad on Sundays, but he was taking care of us. He was keeping us housed, clothed, fed. Yeah, where can we look today for hope and guidance as the family continues to be under attack, and particularly father sons? I happen to think that the damage is done. I mean, in one sense, we've almost lost the fight. But on the other hand, that's an opportunity for us because things are a mess. People aren't happy, right? People are miserable. They're addicted to drugs, alcohol, porn, whatever it is. We're not supposed to live this way. We are called to something much greater. John Paul II is one of my heroes, but I read a biography where John Paul, 6 months after he's elected, he goes back to Poland, right? And for 40 years, the communists had been drilling into the people the state. And there was a real underground resistance, and not so underground, but the church was resisting it. And they liberalized abortion laws, they attacked the family. John Paul's mission, this biographer says, was in going back to Poland, was to tell the people, you are not who they, the government, say you are. Let me remind you of who you really are. So we have this world now that has told us, that it's gotten so absurd, and God bless the folks struggling in the whole trans space. Imagine being a 15-year-old kid and thinking that you're in the wrong body. There is a pain there, and that's hard to wrap your head around. That kid needs love, number one. So, love your kid, period, full stop. I've been talking with a friend who has a kid struggling with this. It is a long journey, but you love your kid. We know truth. We know objective truth. We know what we ought to do. We know there is a subjective, where again it gets into psychology and personality, and God doesn't make mistakes, okay? But we went through something called the fall. The fall, Adam and Eve, right? This is kind of what they get at. What this one central misery, the one central wrong, the key to interpreting reality is to understand what happened when we fell. Adam and Eve are there in the garden. The things are good. God comes down and walks with Adam. There's a filial relationship. It wasn't good enough for Adam. It wasn't good enough for Satan, because the theologians tell us that God revealed to Satan, Lucifer, the most brilliant angel, what the plan was. You're going to have to bow to a human. Can't do that. I'm out of here. So, and then Satan says, I got to trip them up too. Not knowing the full story, Aslan breaks the table, right? The taking from the tree of knowledge and good and evil. I got this. I can figure this out. And isn't that kind of like what we're seeing played out today? The whole the trans kind of movement is really, I call it neo-Gnosticism. And so the Gnostics were a heresy 1800 years ago that really emphasized the spiritual, really not the body. What was in the mind was what governed. But we have a union of body and mind. And so what can we be doing today in our families? Love and truth. Love and truth. Love them, but don't be afraid to speak the truth. And do it in a way that you leave the door open. It's the story of the prodigal, right? The other book I mentioned in this thing is Henry Nouwen's book on the return of the prodigal son, where the dad is waiting. He's waiting. He's like scanning the horizon. Where's my son? Yeah, it could be any one of us. And so Henry Nouwen writes this reflection on what it was like, the humility that the prodigal had to finally get to realize that it was better back at his father's home. And then he does this really good reflection on the elder son, who has been following the rules his whole life, and then sees a party thrown for the wretch. And you talk about master-slave relationship. The elder son was in a master-slave relationship from the son's perspective. He thought he had to earn the father's love. And so he broke his back and followed all the rules and did everything right. And then he throws a party for the other guy. You kidding me? What about me? What does the dad say? Son, everything I have is yours. Imagine that. Imagine the eternal God who scatters 13 billion light years across the sky, who knows the numbers of the hairs on our head, of all 100 billion of us who have ever lived, who knows us intimately, telling us that everything he has is ours. How can that be? He's an infinite God. That's how it can be. So I got a long answer. unconditional love for your kid. Number one, we gotta be shouting that. When I held my daughter, my oldest, for the first time, it was the first time I really got unconditional love. You know, I like looked at her and I said, there is nothing she will ever do that would cause me not to love her. That was a small fraction of the way God feels about us. We good? Yeah. All right. The other handout was this orphan son handout for reflection, kind of like just this, you know, how are we walking? Are we walking like a son of God, or are we really on our own? So that can kind of tie into the conversation as well.